Four discoveries that rewrote the history of the Philippines, and one that scholars still debate. Welcome to Echoes of Ancients. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. We dive into stories that have been buried beneath someone else's narrative. So let's talk about the palace, not the ruins, not the hill with a sign. We're talking about a palace with post holes the size of an adult torso, with artifacts arranged in a way that shows powerful people lived there, making decisions for thousands. This palace is older than the Colosseum, older than the fall of the Roman Republic. It has been on Philippine soil all this time, while generations of textbooks told Filipino students their ancestors were simple fishing communities waiting for civilization to arrive by ship. That ship, of course, was Spanish, and that story has never told the whole truth. The location is Cebu, specifically near the barangay of Magpayang, where workers conducting routine maintenance stumbled upon something that didn't behave like ordinary soil. They called in an archaeologist, then another. Soon a team was mobilized from the National Museum of the Philippines, and what they found beneath the surface stopped the conversation. The post holes formed a pattern consistent with a large elevated structure. Fragments of Chinese trade pottery dated to the 10th and 11th centuries. Layers of burned material indicating the site had a dramatic end. The scale of all this pointed to something organized, something planned, requiring governing authority for construction and maintenance. Here's the kicker. The Philippine archipelago had a palace long before Ferdinand Magellan's fleet spotted land in 1521. Think about that. An interesting fact. The main narrative about pre-colonial Philippines always acknowledged that trade existed. Fine. Traders came and went, goods were exchanged, but it implied Filipinos were passive participants, recipients of external sophistication. The discovery in Cebu doesn't support that picture. The post holes tell a different story. You don't build a structure of that scale without a workforce. You don't organize a workforce without power. You don't sustain power without a political system. The palace is not just architecture, it's proof of governance. And here's the part that irritates certain scholars. This structure predates the barangay system as described by the Spanish. The Spanish came, saw chieftains, and called them primitive. They saw wooden structures and labeled them temporary. They saw oral traditions and called it a lack of history. They were wrong on all counts, and the soil of Cebu confirms this once again. But the palace is just one part. To grasp the magnitude of the debate, you need to head north. By the way, the Laguna Copper Plate is housed in the National Museum in Manila. Most Filipinos have heard of it. Fewer have read what it says. Discovered in 1989 by an antique dealer along the Lumbang River, the plate is inscribed in Old Malay script mixed with Sanskrit and Old Javanese borrowings. The date on it corresponds to the year 900. Wait, let's be precise. The inscription dates to the 9th of April in the year 900. To clarify, the Laguna Copper Plate is dated to 900. Scholars place it in the year 900. The accepted translation puts it in 900 of our era. The document records a debt forgiveness issued by the chieftain of Tondo. Yes, Tondo. It uses formal legal language. It mentions a complex social hierarchy, including nobles, traders, and a figure with a title derived from Sanskrit. This is not a shopping list scratched out by an illiterate fisherman. This is a legal document from a functioning bureaucratic state. You know, 900 of our era. Manila existed as a literate, legally sophisticated political entity before the University of Paris was established. The copper plate sat in a box at the National Museum for years before a Dutch scholar named Antoon Postma translated it and published his findings. The Philippine academic community reacted with something between excitement and institutional paralysis. Schools didn't rush to revise their curricula. The Department of Education didn't launch a campaign. The document remained in its case, accurate and ignored. This gap between discovery and curricular change is where much of Philippine history resides. Now pay attention. The reason for this slow acceptance deserves mention. Colonial education systems don't dissolve peacefully. Spain ruled the Philippines for 333 years. The American administration governed for nearly another 50. Both systems had a vested interest in portraying pre-colonial Filipinos as people without a developed past. Spain needed to justify its mission. America needed to justify benevolent assimilation. If Filipinos already had palaces, legal documents, and international trade networks, the whole mission civilizing argument would collapse. That's why textbooks remained weak on the depth of the pre-colonial era, and generations of students accepted this vacuum as fact. You know, it's not a conspiracy. That's how colonial bureaucracy works. No one sat in a room and said, "Suppress the copper plate." They designed a curriculum that started history with Spanish contact, and absence did the rest. Now there's a third discovery, located in a region most people outside the Philippines have never heard of: the royal tombs in Butuan and the balangay boats. Butuan, on Mindanao, gave archaeologists what they weren't prepared for: boats. Ancient boats, buried in the ground, dating back to the 3rd century. Some estimates suggest even earlier dates. A balangay is not a canoe, it's a plank-built vessel, sophisticated enough for open waters, large enough to carry trade cargo, with a construction method that required specialized knowledge passed down through generations of boat builders. Butuan was not a fishing village, it was a maritime state. Chinese records from the 10th century refer to it as a state that sent tribute missions to the court of the Song dynasty. The Chinese did not accept tribute missions from villages, they took them from kingdoms. Butuan had a king. His name appears in Chinese records. The Chinese approximated the ruler's name phonetically, as they did with all foreign names, but diplomatic correspondence exists in the archives of the Song dynasty, waiting for someone to read it. Philippine maritime traders traveled to China and negotiated at the imperial court while Europe was still in its early Middle Ages. The balangay boats are now recognized by UNESCO, yet their implications have not fully entered the broader historical conversation. Let's say that maritime Southeast Asia is discussed as a vague zone where trade occurred. The specific complexity of Philippine maritime culture, engineering, navigation, diplomatic networks, continues to be absorbed into a regional label. There's one point. Butuan deserves its own place in the history of human seafaring. It's not there yet, and it connects back to Cebu, back to the palace. Now notice this: the post holes in Cebu, the copper plate in Manila, the balangay boats in Butuan. None of these discoveries occurred in isolation. Archaeologists have been finding them for decades in various parts of the archipelago under different circumstances, but all point in one direction. The Philippines was not a blank canvas. Before the galleons arrived, a complex, multi-tiered civilization was moving goods, forgiving debts, building governing structures, and sending diplomats to foreign courts. Now pay attention. The frustrating part isn't that scholars were unaware. Some knew. The frustrating part is the bureaucratic inertia that kept knowledge from transitioning into classrooms, into national identity, into how Filipino children understand their past. Discovery gets published, the museum acquires the artifact, a scholar writes an article, then the article stays in a journal. The curriculum committee meets. They table the discussion. They meet again next year. Nothing moves. That's the enemy of this story. Not a colonial villain twisting his moustache, but the committee that couldn't muster the courage to deal with it. Moving on to the next point. The discovery of the palace in Cebu is fresh enough that a full archaeological report is still being compiled. Peer review takes time. Radiocarbon dating takes time. The scientists working on this are cautious, and caution is the right pace for such significant claims. Preliminary results are impressive. Final confirmation will take years. And somewhere in the Visayas, in Mindanao, in Luzon, there are places yet untouched. Not just untouched. Construction workers will stumble upon something unexpected. Someone will call an archaeologist, and the picture will continue to expand. Every shovel that breaks the Philippine soil right now is a potential argument against everything colonial curricula implied. The land is full of counter-arguments. Philippine civilization didn't need to wait for external validation to be advanced. It built palaces. It wrote legal documents. It sent ships across open oceans and sat at the tables of foreign courts. Think about that. History has always been there. It just needed someone to dig. There's a broader human pattern at play. Conquered civilizations don't lose territory. They lose